Good afternoon. I think I shall begin. Welcome to my session. My name is Adele, and I'm from INTI International College Penang, in Malaysia. Okay, so my topic today is on elevating learning motivation and engagement with online learning. So this is an overview of this session. The first part of this session, I will talk a little bit on, because the topic is about how to elevate or enhance learning motivation and engagement. So the first part of this session will be, I'll talk a little bit about the psychology of motivation, okay? And then after that, I will share a case study of how these principles of motivation have been applied into a course, to enhance the engagement of the students. And then the third part consists of sharing with you the feedback that we have gathered from our students for this learning intervention, and what are the considerations and recommendations for future course design. Okay, so the term online learning is pretty broad. It encompasses learning from online means, okay? And it doesn't mean that it's a fully online course. It just means that the learning resources and content are available online. And this can be part of fully online courses, or we call it e-learning. But online learning can also happen in blended courses, where part of the learning is in the classroom, but we also expect students to spend some time to learn independently from online resources. And we can also have online learning even in traditional face-to-face classes, but we have put up learning resources and materials online for students as a supplementary learning material. So, I mean, it's just a very broad and general term involving learning that, in other words, it involves giving students a facility to independently learn online, okay? And there are obviously many advantages to that. And this is not all inclusive, but some more common advantages that I can think of course, is that with online learning, it can be personalized and customized, all right? Because, well, if you look at it from the perspective of, let's say, learning preferences, some people learn through different modalities. Like some people like it visual, some people like it auditory, read, write, kinesthetic, VAR key is one way of looking at different learning preferences. So if you put materials online, then you would be able to cater to more different learning modalities. So yeah, you can customize, learning materials for your students, right? And of course, online learning provides ubiquitous and flexible learning because the material is always there. The students are not limited to place and time, so they can access the materials anytime, anywhere, okay? And as mentioned, we can easily put in multimedia material. We can have interactive online simulations, and even in online learning spaces, we can have discussions and collaborations asynchronously or even synchronously. All right, and another advantage of online learning is that we can build formative assessments in the form of quizzes, exercises that are actually auto-graded by the system. And we can also automate feedback or give personalized feedback. So actually there's a lot of flexibility offered through online learning, okay? But despite the fact that learning can happen anywhere and anytime, one of the challenges that we face, of course, is that we find that there's often underutilization of learning facilities. I think there's also been much research in this area for people who study, learning patterns and trends. For instance, I teach physics, right? Right now, I'm actually managing the teaching and learning office where I do train instructors, but I do teach a class of physics. And for me, to do well in physics is essential for students to practice a lot. Okay, so what I do is I create a lot of online quizzes for the students to practice. There's online quizzes for every topic. But if I look into the analytics data, I will find that not every student practices. So there is a sense that there's so much given to them, but it can be underutilized. How's your experience? I mean, I don't know, in your institutions, when you put things online, do you find that the students are all very motivated to go engage with the materials? Maybe for some. Maybe some materials, they will automatically go to it, but there are some things that are useful to them, but they may not look at it, right? So I find that this is one of the challenges, that there's so much learning opportunity, but it is not well utilized. Another challenge of online learning is it definitely requires learner motivation and self-regulation, right? I mean, I can put in my practice quizzes and I tell them, hey, you need to do them if you want to do well in physics, but they will need to regulate themselves. They will need to actually find their own motivation to do it. I can't be there looking at them and monitoring them all the time and say, do it now, right? So it does require self-motivation. It requires their discernment and guidance. You need to guide them on learning strategies and focus, because sometimes when you go into an online environment, there's so much materials there, and sometimes you don't know where to focus. Yeah, so, if you go in there and say, yeah, I know everything is helpful, everything is useful, but where do I start? Okay. And another challenge is that, of course, in an online environment, you can feel quite isolated in your learning and frustrated because you are in an isolated learning space. You don't always have friends beside you or to have your instructor in front of you personally encouraging you. So even though the materials are there, you can feel a sense of isolation. So, I mean, these challenges are real. And, I do get feedback that falls, in one of these categories from my students when I ask them, why are you not doing the exercises, what is the challenge that you're facing? So it's captured in some of these points here. All right. So because of that, it's actually part of my research. I wanted to know how I can actually overcome some of these challenges. How can I motivate my students to want to try and do? So I'm going to customize and personalize this in the context of my physics, right? How do I get my students to want to practice physics? How do I motivate them to want to engage? So I refer, first of all, to what I feel is the relevant motivational learning theory. We heard earlier that it's pedagogy, and technology will have to support the pedagogy. So how do you motivate? It's actually a very broad question, and there are many motivational theories out there. But in the context of what I am trying to do with my students, basically, if I want them to practice, then I have to look at what are the motivational theories that are relevant. So one of them I find that's relevant, the first one is called the expectancy value theory, which says that people are basically motivated if they feel that they have a high probability to succeed in a task. Okay? And that there is some incentive value in succeeding in that. If they find that, if they feel that I can't do this and there's very low probability for me to succeed in something, then usually the initial motivation for that task will not be very high. Okay, so, but in other words, we had to find a way to increase that sense of expectancy so that the motivation will also arise. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Then secondly is a self-efficacy theory. Okay, the sense of self-efficacy influences effort and perseverance in challenges. Okay, so expectancy is about the sense of, can I do this, right? Self-efficacy is a little bit more general. Maybe it's a little bit of a sense of self-esteem or a general sense of your own ability. In a sense, it can be related. Okay, so again, self-efficacy theory says that generally, if you have a good sense of self-efficacy, then you will want to be more willing to put in effort and persevere in a challenge, because there's something in you that believes that, yeah, I think I can do this. If you don't believe that you can do this, then you are not likely to put in the effort and the perseverance. Okay, so this is a psychological factor. before motivation is birthed, all right? And then after that, another relevant theory is the self-determination theory, which says that motivation is influenced for a person if two psychological needs are supported. One of them is that you have a sense of autonomy, and the next one is that you have a sense of competence. Okay, what that really means is that if you want motivation to encourage motivation in a person, you have to give them the sense of autonomy, that they can choose to do this out of their own freedom. Because when you get someone to do something because they're going to be punished if they don't do it, or they're going to be penalized in terms of marks if they don't do it, then they will do it, but you won't get motivation if that's what you're looking for. Okay, you can force them to do it, but we are talking about motivation. So a person really feels motivated only at the first place if they could choose to do it. Okay, it's kind of a choice, autonomous. And then there is a natural inclination, a psychological need in people to want to feel competent. So actually it's also tied to the sense of achievement. People will feel motivated if they feel that they can achieve something. So if they are free to choose to do something, and they can achieve, they can actually work towards getting a sense of achievement, then the motivation will arise for doing that thing. Okay, and one more perspective is about goal orientation. And it's kind of tied to the sense of competence. Some people get a sense of whether they're competent by just looking at their own performance and measuring themselves against themselves. It means like, oh, I got 6 upon 10 in my first attempt. Now I'm getting 8 upon 10. And then I get 10 upon 10. So I feel competent because I know I'm doing better. But some people actually feel competent by comparing themselves with others. So they would feel that, out of a class of 30 students, if I'm in the top 10, then I will feel competent because I'm above average. So they get a sense of their abilities by comparing themselves to others. There's no right or wrong. It's just that people do perceive competence in different ways. So sometimes some people will just compare themselves against their prior performance, and some people prefer to, they get a sense of whether they are competent or not by comparing their performance with others. Now, there are so many more other motivational theories, but I am just looking at this 4 because I want to actually design my course based on the principles that I can extract from these theories. So what I'm trying to do here is, if I want to motivate my students to take time to practice physics, I have to, first of all, find a way to actually help them build a sense of expectancy in physics. Because a lot of people come to my class and they say, I can't do physics. They don't have that sense of that efficacy or expectancy that they can excel in physics. So when I ask them to practice physics, one of the stumbling blocks is like, they're saying, I'm not good in physics, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. So I'm not motivated to do the exercise because I don't have that sense of expectancy in the first place. Okay. Then of course, as teachers, what we do, we want to motivate students is that we'll say, okay, do it, otherwise you won't get marks. So yeah, you can get your students to do it. They'll do the minimum effort. They'll practice. They'll do it once just to get some marks out of that. But you're not going to be able to get them to practice voluntarily because there's no sense of autonomy. They'll do it because you have made them do it. Okay? And again, I just want to create an environment where I want to give them the freedom to choose to do it. I want to give them an environment where I hope I can give them a sense of expectancy that they can do it, and then I'll give them a platform to find the 2 styles of self-assessment. I'll try to support those who want to self-assess by looking at their own performance, comparing to their prior performance, and I also want to support those who perhaps prefer to assess by comparing themselves to others. So I'm trying to actually build my course design to support some of these motivational principles. And I think I've put in the suggestions on how we can support this in practical ways. So right now, I'm going to just move on to just share a case study of how how this was actually implemented in the physics course. So we use the Blackboard Learn environment. And they are really great tools that, test tools that come with that environment that I really appreciate. So what I did was, for every chapter, I created practice quizzes, okay? And actually, it doesn't mean that, we must create in a chapter. Actually, the idea is that if the course is really difficult and a chapter is really difficult, you can break that chapter into smaller chunks. And then you create practice exercises for each subtopic, for instance. So you don't overwhelm the students, because sometimes when the concept is really big and wide and you get them to do a challenge that covers so many different concepts, again, they will feel overwhelmed. So we can actually break it down into smaller chunks first, smaller challenges, okay? But in this case, I just give an example that I create a quiz for every chapter. And in each of these chapters, actually the questions that were created, I create a question bank. So there's usually quite a lot of questions in there. And I have set, I've created question sets where every time the student tries the quiz, Blackboard will just randomly pick 5 questions out of the bank. And not only that, but there's also this test type called calculated formula, where Blackboard, where the system also randomizes the variables in the questions. So they can see the same question, but the variables will change. So in other words, it's very low chance for students to see exactly the same question. It will be randomly generated with different questions, or even if they see the same question, it will be different variables. So they have to recalculate for each time. Okay, so as the features are there, I put unlimited attempts. They can try as many times. And when they submit, I will give feedback. If it's right, I'll just give a simple feedback like good job, but if it's not correct, then I will give a feedback that gives them hints on how to answer the questions. But the quizzes, they were ungraded and they were available through the semester. So in other words, I was trying to support the sense of autonomy. As the students were just free to do it. They didn't have to do it, but they could choose to do it. And this is just a snapshot of how the question bank looks like. So all the questions are calculated formula type. So there's a bank, and anytime the quiz will just randomly pick 5 out of this. And this is, again, a snapshot of how the calculated formula question looks like. I don't actually put in the actual variable values, but I will key in an answer formula so that, Blackboard will just auto-grade it for me. So, and if the students don't get it right, I do give them some hints on how to answer these questions. All right, so, this is a screenshot of the kind of feedback that the students will get when they submit. So if they answered correctly, they'll find a simple response to say good or excellent. If they did not answer correctly, then they will get some hint on how to do it. Okay. So again, this is meant to help them raise their level of competency. So of course, ideally, the problems that we pose to them should be optimal to their level. Okay, depends on how much effort you want to put in. You can actually build quizzes that are of easy level, medium level, and difficult level. And that will, again, further customize this learning exercise to the student's ability. All right, so that students who feel that they are really not good at this particular chapter, they can start off at the easier level first and then move on to the more difficult levels. Okay, yeah. Okay, so, and of course, as an incentive, I do use the achievement tool where I will award badges when they do score full points. Okay, but the badges, they are not worth marks, but they are there as a symbol of competency. And this is how the badges look like. So I just create the badges and then we put it in the achievement through the achievement tool, which will automatically deploy the badges to the students based on a certain criteria. And also, I also built a leaderboard where students are identified through matriculation number. So, I mean, they don't normally know each other's matriculation number, so it does provide some anonymity to the students, so they don't feel embarrassed if they did not, have any badges. So remember just now I said that some people self-assess through just comparing themselves to their own prior performance. And when they can try the quizzes multiple times, they can see how many points they get at each attempt. If they self-assess through that way, then it will support them, because they will just see how many points they get. And when they do get 10 upon 10, they get a badge. So that is for their own personal self-assessment. But some students do actually like the idea of being able to see how other people are doing, just to get a sense of whether they are competent or not. And this is for that, to support that reason. So I put out a leaderboard, because the leaderboard allows the students to compare their performance with others. And I do know that some students really find that this was the element that really motivated them to do it, because they tell me, I just need to collect all the badges. Someone else has all the badges, so I got to collect it all too. So there are students who tell me that, so I know that it does not motivate, not everybody is motivated in the same way, but there will be some who are going to be motivated by this, so I just put up an additional element for those. Okay. And I do have evidence that the students do actually put in a lot of effort to practice, because when I go into the full grade center, I can see that, like I said, they can practice as many times. This was captured quite recently, because I implement this in all my courses. So I can see that voluntarily, the students do practice many times. Okay, and I actually was very encouraged to see students practice physics like that, because, well, many years ago, before all this came about, we would do our practices through only pieces of tutorial paper. And I get the students say, go home, please practice. Next week when you come to class, let's discuss. And then when they come back to class, I say, what have you done? And then, some of them would not come with any work. Okay, so this way I know whether they are working or not. And I could see that some of them, not everyone, I would, to be honest, not everyone, but some of them are actually engaging very well because of this. And also, this is just an example of cost analytics, because I also wanted to know whether this really helped them to achieve better learning outcomes. So I'm plotting against cost access with Grade Score Center. Grade Center score actually they do have summative assessments. They do have tests during mid-semester and end semester that gives them marks. So I've keyed in those marks into the system, and I'm plotting their Blackboard activity versus their marks. And I do see a positive correlation, which does show that when students do practice, they do much better. I mean, that's true for physics anyway. I don't know if that's the case for all other disciplines, but that's true for physics. And I use this actually to counsel the students, because when I return them their test paper, I will hover my mouse over these dots and I will know who they are. So I will tell the student, and I will tell the student, I tell them, you are not doing well in your test, not because you cannot do physics, it's just that you didn't practice as many times as your friends. At least this is the evidence of that. So I use this to also counsel the students. I don't have that data right here. I can't remember. Only the R value is there. Okay, so I think that's just a case study of one of the courses. But not this course, but some time ago, I did purposely do an experimental research on this, where I was comparing two cohorts. I had one cohort where they had everything the same. The syllabus was taught in the same way, and then there were the practice quizzes that you saw just now, but I didn't put in the badge, I didn't put in the leaderboard elements, okay? Then I had a second experimental cohort where again, everything was the same, but I did put in a badge, and then I did put in a leaderboard. I just wanted to see if that made any difference at all. So this is the result. Okay. So, as you can see, this is the, it was based on a control and experimental group with 57 and 60 students. And actually I measured quite a lot of things, but I will only highlight a few today. In terms of intrinsic motivation, the statistical analysis did show that the experimental, or I call it the gamified cohort, they did have a higher intrinsic motivation, and it was significant. Where questions were asking, I enjoyed doing the quizzes. I find doing the quizzes a fun experience, that kind of questions, right? There was an increase in that response. So it seems that badges and leaderboard did increase the intrinsic motivation. Probably gave them a sense of achievement, as you could, I'll show you the feedback later. And the A motivation, which is like questions like, I have no reason to do these quizzes, I'm not motivated to do these quizzes, those kind of response statements, there was a decrease in A motivation for the gamified group. So again, well, that corresponds. There's an increase in motivation, so there's a decrease in A motivation. All right, now the interesting thing is that because remember, one of the motivational theory is that we need to actually support the sense of competence and support the sense of autonomy. And actually my results show that in terms of competence, there is no significant difference. In terms of autonomy, there is. And I think this is something that a takeaway for me from this experiment is that I need to find ways. In other words, what I'm doing with just badges and leaderboard is not enough to increase their sense of competence, to make questions like, I can do this quiz well. So there is no increase in that. And actually, I was just giving some feedback. I said, it would be nice if in Blackboard that, there could be a system where we can just start with easy questions and then move on to medium level and then difficult ones, as in progressively, because right now I had to manually divide them into sections, which actually takes a lot of effort, right? If I can actually do something that is more gradual, it's more like leveling up in a game, then maybe the students' competence can actually slowly, maybe I could support their sense of competence better. Because sometimes when they jump into a topic quiz, they may find some questions just too difficult for them to do. So the mechanism doesn't really support their sense of competence yet. But it did support their sense of autonomy, okay? Somehow, by giving them badges and leaderboard, maybe they just feel like, oh, I'm doing this because I want to collect badges. It's my own choice. So they did actually report higher sense of autonomy because of that, okay? And finally, when it comes to engagement, yes, there was a significant increase in engagement. So the students in general practice a lot more time significantly in the gamified group. So I mean, this is just my exploration on how to increase the motivation and engagement in my course by trying to support some of these psychological needs that I have outlined earlier. And this is, I conducted a focus interview, and these are some of the response that was captured from the students, So they said that having badges and leaderboard, gave them a sense of wanting to do more and a sense of achievement when they finally got it. And some people think that they are amazing if they get a badge. Some people are motivated because of the competitiveness. I think they are referring to the leaderboard because they were talking about, wow, is they're seeing their friends collect more badges, so they feel like they want to collect some too, Yeah. So I think that actually, instead of forcing the students to do it by, giving marks or something like that, if we can give marks, that's fine. But I don't think that's practical in all courses to have to give marks to everything that we do. So in this sense, creating this kind of quizzes where, questions are randomized and, they have multiple attempts and they can get badges when they do well, can motivate them to engage more. So in closing, just for some considerations and recommendations to increase learning motivation is to provide opportunities for learners to experience success. I think that's about, for me in physics, it's really like I said, I haven't really achieved supporting the sense of competence yet. So my next part in my design would be see how I can break down my exercises further to especially help the weak students to feel that they can do it, that they can succeed in this. Yeah. So I might want to further break down my quizzes into easy, medium, and hard. That was a suggestion that the students gave to me. So they can collect bronze, silver, and gold badges based on the level of difficulty. The students actually said that because some of them felt overwhelmed that they couldn't get a badge. Okay. Support the sense of autonomy by providing choices. Okay, and I think many times we always make things compulsory for the students. So actually giving them multiple attempts and giving them the choice to do it, they can actually build the motivation that comes from their own and not from us through this design. Provide them the freedom to fail, because many times when they do exercises, it's all about marks. So when it's all about marks, your brain freezes when you're trying to learn. You're like, when you're doing a physics question, it's like, oh, how can I get this right? Because my mark depends on it. So we have to give them an environment where it's not about marks, that you're doing it, and then as well, you're having fun collecting the badge, you are actually acquiring the skill to do physics. Yeah. Use game elements to capture their attention, to increase their interest, and that's fine. You can use badges or leaderboards. Support people who self-assess through mastery, that means comparing for their own selves, or even comparing with others, performance goals, okay? Provide informational feedback, and give rewards that is performance contingent. I've read many motivational theories. They say that if you give badges for things that don't really matter, that anybody can get, eventually they won't find it valuable anymore. So we have to give performance contingent rewards. Okay, and then, yeah, it's a continuous learning. So for me, I've run this 1 or 2 rounds, and I'm still tweaking the design. And for all I know, for different cohorts, you may need to actually do things slightly differently. So it's about gathering learner feedback for continuous improvement. Yeah, I think that's all. So thank you very much. Yeah, I'm open to questions if there are any. Yes? Right. For calculated formula, there's actually a text editor box, and you can do all kinds. You have trigonometric functions, sine, cosine, everything. You have square root, logarithms, everything is there. So you can create formulas with any of those. Mm. Yeah, like, you know, speed, W, X, and Y in square brackets, automatically generated within your specified range. I just specified W is between 1 and 10, a value of 1 and 10. X is within a value of 10 and 20, and then they will auto-generate numbers within that range. Yes, I mean, you will have to use the square brackets, but it's actually not difficult. You just have to get used to it. Hmm? Yeah, for us, I mean, at INTI, I think the culture is, because there's so many tools in there and not everybody uses it. So what, of course, yeah, personal experiences we will normally explore on our own. Sometimes I will kind of search it from the internet. So there'll be people elsewhere posting how to do this. So I will adopt it, and when I get it to work, I will share it with my colleagues. Yeah, yeah, but it didn't take too much time to pick that up. Yeah. Yeah, I find this tool definitely very useful for subjects like physics. Yeah. Yes. 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 That's right. Okay, thank you for that question. Yes, yes, definitely. We need to be cautious. Like one of the things I mentioned is they're just saying that if you want to give rewards, it should be performance contingent, like what I mentioned just now, because if you give rewards for things that anything is like you can get a badge for everything for like even one attempt you can get a badge. Sometimes you take away the meaning of it. But actually, the psychology is that the badge is just a symbol. It's really nothing. It's just a picture. But it's what it actually evokes in that person. What does it mean? So in other words, the way we give a badge is part of your design. In this case, the badge, somebody gets a badge when they actually get the quiz correct, 10 upon 10. And it's actually not an easy feat. So it's more like the design actually encourages them to try again and again and again. And then when you achieve 10 upon 10, it means that you can do it. It's to build that sense of efficacy and expectancy for yourself. So I think that's what the badge really is supposed to symbolize in this case. I'm not using badges like it is some kind of currency where with badge you can buy things or something like that. There also been research that actually cautions us against rewards that are physical and that can be monetary in nature, because those things can actually, it's like this, if you like to do something, for instance, a kid likes to play the piano, and then you tell the kid, if you practice the piano, I'll give you $10 for it. And one day when you tell the kids, I'm not going to give you $10 for it, even though the kid actually likes to play the piano, kid will say, oh, you're not giving me $10, so I'm not going to play the piano anymore. So there's so many other kinds of psychological research that you have to be careful when it comes to rewards. But if the rewards are not physical and they are performance contingent, usually so far the research says that it can actually help build motivation. Yeah, but there's definitely caution, even with leaderboards, because they say leaderboards, people can view leaderboards. Some people compare upwards and some people compare downwards. So there are some people somehow in life, they like to see, they feel really happy when they see that they have done better than others. Then they feel like, I'm competent, I'm done better than others. But then there are others who somehow have a habit of always comparing, how do I say, it's upwards or downwards? But I'm just trying to say, some people, they always feel that, I'm never competent because I'm not first. So they actually feel less competent when someone else does better than them.
Yeah, and that's some of
Correct. Right. Right. In fact, you find that, remember the competence scale, right? There wasn't much difference because it's possible that it's like if you award people with symbols of competence with a badge and all that, you can highlight their competence. but it's a double-edged sword. You can also highlight their incompetence. In other words, when they don't get it, then they feel, oh, I'm actually no good in this. When there's no badge, they don't have a sense of whether they're good or they're not good at all. So, I mean, yeah, it's true that people can view it differently. So that's why I always gather feedback, and you see whether it actually suits the particular cohort or the culture of the students and how best to deploy it. But you're right that we need to be cautious about that. Yeah. Yes? Right? 3. Correct. And relatedness. Ah, okay. She's coming from the yeah, part of the motivational theory, self-determination theory, actually says that you can encourage motivation if you support some psychological needs. And I have chosen to highlight 2 psychological needs, which is autonomy and competence. But the theory actually does say that you can also support motivation if you support the sense of relatedness. And it's true, in a sense that if there are structures in there that when they do well, somehow you build in some social structures where you can share your achievements or encourage one another, that can, the human factor can support motivation. So yeah, I didn't design that component in because I feel that I need to probably change this to could be a collaborative work. Or I think for me, I may be wrong, but in the Blackboard Learn environment, there's not so many social networking features that I can work around with to support that. So because of that, I've chosen to support mainly the autonomy and the competence. Yeah, but I do know there's lots of research out there which builds in the social aspect into their learning because that can enhance motivation as well. You're right about that. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you.